4th, 2017, a commercial goes live. 2 minutes and 39 seconds of footage. Within 24 hours, it sparked global outrage, was pulled from every platform, and forced a public apology. This single ad became one of the most mocked campaigns in advertising history. And here's what makes this truly insane. At least a dozen executives approved this. Multiple creative teams worked on it. They spent millions, and somehow, not one person said, "Wait, this is a terrible idea." To understand how spectacularly Pepsi screwed this up, you need to know where they were in 2017. For decades, Pepsi absolutely dominated cultural marketing. Pepsi didn't just sell soda, they sold cool. They were the Pepsi generation, the choice of the next generation. They understood youth culture in a way that made Coca-Cola look like your grandfather's brand. Their strategy was flawless. Partner with whoever defines the cultural moment, ride that wave, and position Pepsi as the drink for people who get it. And it worked for decades. But by 2017, Pepsi had a problem. Millennials and Gen Z weren't just buying products anymore. They were buying values. Social movements were everywhere. Black Lives Matter was dominating headlines after years of police brutality cases. The Women's March had drawn millions into the streets. Climate activism was surging. Young people were angry, they were organized, and they were demanding change. And Pepsi looked at this moment and thought, this is our opportunity. They saw brands like Nike taking risks. They saw Ben & Jerry's speaking out. They saw companies getting praised for taking stands. So Pepsi decided they wanted in on that action. What they didn't realize was that there's a difference between supporting a movement and exploiting one. April 2017, Pepsi releases an ad called Jump In, starring Kendall Jenner, reality TV royalty, famous for privilege, Instagram fashion, and absolutely zero history of activism. Here's the premise. Kendall is at a glamorous photo shoot. Suddenly, she notices something through the window. A diverse group of young, incredibly attractive people marching past. They're holding signs, they're chanting, they're protesting something. What are they protesting? Great question. The signs say things like, "Join the conversation," "Peace," not "Stop police brutality," not "Black Lives Matter," just vague, feel-good corporate buzzwords. The protesters look like they were cast from elite model management. Perfect hair, perfect outfits, smiling, dancing. It looks more like a street festival for a perfume launch. Kendall is moved by this beautiful, sanitized display of activism, so she rips off her wig, wipes out her lipstick, and joins the march. Because nothing says "I care about social justice" like abandoning your modeling gig to join a cause you know absolutely nothing about. She grabs a Pepsi from a conveniently placed ice bucket and approaches a line of stoic police officers. And then, Kendall hands a Pepsi to a police officer. He takes it, he takes a sip, he smiles. The tension, it melts away. The crowd erupts in celebration. Protesters and police are now friends. Problem solved. Social justice achieved. Thanks, Pepsi. Let me give you some context that Pepsi apparently forgot existed. This ad was released in 2017, just 3 years after Michael Brown was shot and killed in Ferguson, Missouri, sparking nationwide protests. 2 years after this iconic photo, Aisha Evans standing peacefully before a line of riot police in Baton Rouge right before they arrested her. This was a time when real protesters were being met with tear gas, rubber bullets, police dogs, and mass arrests. When activists were risking their lives, their safety, and their freedom to demand basic human rights. And Pepsi looked at that reality and said, you know what would solve systemic racism and police brutality? A can of soda and a supermodel? The audacity is almost impressive. Here's what's truly baffling. This wasn't some intern's rogue idea posted by accident. This was a global campaign. Pepsi spent millions producing this ad. They hired a celebrity. They rented locations in major cities. They cast hundreds of extras. They shot for days. They went through post-production, color grading, sound design. Then it went through multiple rounds of approvals, creative directors, brand managers, legal teams, marketing strategists, executives, senior leadership. At every single stage, people with decades of experience with entire teams of advisors approved this. Not one person in that chain said, this trivializes real suffering. Not one person said, this might offend the communities we're trying to reach. Not one person thought, maybe we shouldn't suggest police brutality can be solved with a soft drink. The groupthink was so powerful, the cultural blindness so complete, that a room full of highly paid professionals convinced themselves this was a good idea. And that might be the scariest part of this entire story. But let's talk about the execution, because somehow Pepsi managed to make an already terrible concept even worse. The protest in the ad has no clear cause. It's protest as aesthetic. The signs are meaningless. The protesters are too attractive, too clean, too happy. There's no anger, no urgency, no real emotion. It commodified struggle. It turned genuine activism, people risking their lives for justice, into a fashion statement. It was performative allyship in its most grotesque, most corporate form. Pepsi took the imagery of movements like Black Lives Matter, stripped away the pain, the context, the meaning, and repackaged it as a marketing tool. And they cast Kendall Jenner, a white woman from one of America's wealthiest families, as the hero who solves everything. The symbolism alone is staggering. April 4th, 2017. The ad goes live, and within hours, the internet exploded. Twitter erupted. Activists tore it apart. Celebrities mocked it. Regular people couldn't believe what they were watching. The criticism was swift, brutal, and absolutely unanimous. Bernice King, daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., tweeted a photo of her father being shoved back by police with a caption that said, "If only Daddy would have known about the power of Pepsi." Read that again. The daughter of a man murdered for fighting for civil rights used Pepsi's own ad to show how absurd it was. Saturday Night Live parodied it within days. Memes flooded every platform. People photoshopped Pepsi cans into historical tragedies. The ad became a punchline, a symbol of corporate cluelessness. And then, just 24 hours after release, Pepsi pulled the ad from every platform and issued an apology. 24 hours. That's how long it took for one of the world's biggest brands to realize they'd made a catastrophic mistake. But the damage was already done. The internet never forgets. The financial cost was significant. Between production, media buys, celebrity fees, and the crisis management that followed, estimates suggest Pepsi lost at least $5 million directly. Some analysts put it higher, but money wasn't the real loss, it was reputation. Pepsi had spent decades building their image as the cool, culturally aware brand. In 24 hours, they became a case study on how not to do marketing. Business schools added it to their curriculum, not as inspiration, but as a warning. Years later, it's still referenced as shorthand for tone-deaf marketing. If a brand makes a culturally insensitive move, people say, they pulled a Pepsi. Kendall Jenner later called it the worst moment of her career. She said she was haunted by the backlash, that she felt used and naive. For Pepsi, it was a humbling, expensive reminder. You can't manufacture cultural relevance. You can't profit from pain. Some conversations don't need a corporation's voice. Knowing when to stay quiet is just as important as knowing what to say. And Pepsi didn't know when to shut up. 4 lessons. Authenticity can't be faked. Diverse voices essential. Context, everything. Not every moment needs your brand. Learn them or pay the price.